In this video, we discuss how sexuality is an entire system that is shaped by acts of power. We discuss productive power and repressive power. Productive power are acts of power that encourage expressive acts of sexuality, and repressive power are acts of power that discourage one from expressing.
We live in a world where gender plays a huge role in the expression of one's sexuality, identity, and desires. And no matter how natural and innate sexuality may feel to anyone, there's a strong social constructed stigma behind it, causing people to either repress or produce certain sex identities. This stigma is known as the sexual double standard. The sexual double standard is defined as a moral code that permits men to freely express their sexual desires and inhibits women from freely expressing their sexuality. Believe it or not, the sexual double standard has existed as far back as agricultural production. This historical tradition has shaped and produced differences between men and women. Our society has become extremely shaped by the social constructs of this double standard, creating individuals to become discouraged from acting on anything outside of this gender-conformed norm. Women are discouraged from society to be sexual and should remain sacred and pure by all means. Yet, they are encouraged to sell their bodies through the media for the sole purpose of seeking male attention. This double standard is also noticeable in the typical hookup scene, where all it takes is the one-act rule for a woman to be labeled a slut at a party, yet men get the same amount of judgment for not hooking up with multiple women. Despite how natural sex is for men and women, our society is exposed to several power-gendered inequalities that both promote and discourage certain sexual behaviors. The sexual double standard has created men and women to be complete binaries of one another, in which they are both entitled to the expression of their own gender-conformed identity, behavior, and sexuality.
Behavior versus identity focuses on the internal power struggle that someone can have within themselves and how individuals keep certain identities to cling on to that privilege. In this format, your behaviors are expressing repressive power, while your identity is correlated with the productive power. Behavior is the action one takes because usually those actions align with one's internal desires, while their identity would be the vision of how you would want people to perceive you, specifically in a cis heterosexual way. One of the biggest examples of this power struggle is down low men. These are men who are in relationships with women or publicly express their attraction to women but have sex with men privately. They disguise these hookups as hangouts, usually. Another example of this power struggle is BDSM. It is a style of sex that the general public turns their nose at and is seen as something bad. Most people that live in this lifestyle have a completely different persona once in public. Third example would be any kind of sexual component associated with the elderly. The elderly are supposed to hide their wants because society is not okay with the idea of older women having sex drives. With all of these examples, these groups have been told that they cannot publicly express their feelings, so they keep them inside. People want to have hetero privilege because it gives them the ability to do almost anything they want, like showing simple affection in public without the fear of harassment or violence. The biggest advantage of having this is being included in the charm circle that society has, while the biggest disadvantage is having ignorance towards the other side that usually comes with someone having privilege. Even when having hetero privilege, other social structures come in play with this privilege. A black woman and a white man will never be held at the same standards in society, so it matters where you are in the structure that allow you to freely promote this privilege.
Intersectionality is defined as the connections of social categories. Within the intersectional approach, there are 6 social categories built into society's structure, such as race, gender, sexuality, class, age, and ability. The intersectional approach can operate as both an act of productive or repressive power. The experiences within these 6 social categories are not universal. Thus, members of the most socially acceptable categories are given more privilege to openly express their sexuality, and members of the least socially acceptable categories are at a disadvantage. Status within the 6 social categories of the intersectional approach can be either empowering or hindering upon acts to openly express sexuality. Taking an intersectional consideration of the media allows the intersectional approach to be an act of productive power. The media was described as a racist visual economy where certain races, genders, and forms of sexuality are overly represented within the media. By result, these overly represented social categories are allotted more privileges, encouraging them to openly express actions of their sexuality. The intersectional approach may also operate as an act of repressive power by pressuring Black men to identify as tops and Asian men to identify as bottoms in direct relation to their gendered racial groups. Due to their disempowered racial categories, these Black and Asian men are socially pressured to not express their true sexual desires. Thus, ultimately, by considering the diverse social experiences of members within the 6 social categories within society's structure, the intersectional approach can provide privilege or be hindering in terms of expressive actions of sexuality. Inequalities among the social categories of intersectionality create differences in ability to express sexuality. To conclude, the 3 topics of the sexual double standard, behavior versus identity, and intersectionality each demonstrated sexuality as a system shaped by acts of either productive or repressive power and ultimately influence expression of sexuality.